My name is Chloe Jenkins, and I'm 31 years old. The night my brother announced his fifth child, nobody looked at me first. They looked at him like he had won a medal. My father clapped him on the back. My mother wiped her eyes like another grandchild proved our family was blessed. I stood near the edge of the living room with a paper plate in my hand, already knowing what would come next. Because in my family, every celebration eventually became an unpaid assignment for me. Then my mother turned, smiled like she had solved everything, and said, "You'll handle the kids." Not, "Would you help?" Not, "Can we talk?" Just a command. I put my plate down and said, "Absolutely not." The room went silent so fast I could hear ice shifting in someone's glass. My sister-in-law laughed once and said, "You have no family. This is your training." That was when something inside me stopped bending. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't defend my life to people who had already decided it was empty. I grabbed my purse, walked past every stunned face, and left. But the next morning, while I was still telling myself they would cool down, my phone rang from an unknown number. "Hello, ma'am. This is Officer Brooks. Someone has left 3 children at the community center with a note saying you agreed to take custody for the day." To understand why that phone call broke something open in me, you need to know this was not the first time my family treated my life like spare storage. My brother was Ethan. His wife was Amanda. My mother was Eleanor, the kind of woman who could make manipulation sound like tradition. And my father, Robert, usually stayed quiet until silence became permission. Ethan and Amanda already had 4 children: 8-year-old Zoe, 6-year-old Lucas, 4-year-old Maya, and toddler Owen. I loved those kids, and that was exactly what my family used against me. When Zoe had a fever during my final week of night classes, I was called selfish for not leaving work early. When Lucas's preschool closed, Ethan dropped him at my apartment and said, "You're better with schedules anyway." When Maya was born, my mother told everyone I had volunteered to help Amanda recover, which somehow meant I spent 3 weekends doing laundry, dishes, and bedtime routines while Ethan played golf, because new fathers need breaks too. Every time I pushed back, they acted wounded. Every time I gave in, they called it love. So when Ethan announced baby number 5 at that barbecue, my body reacted before my mind did. I knew that 5th child wasn't only being celebrated as a baby. That baby was another reason to chain me to a role I never chose. After I left, my phone buzzed before I even reached the main road. Mom wrote, "Don't embarrass this family." Ethan said, "You made Amanda cry." Amanda wrote, "One day you'll regret being alone." Dad said, "Just apologize and move on." I ignored all of them. The next morning I met my best friend Caleb at a coffee shop downtown because he was the only person who never treated my boundaries like an attack. I barely sat down before he said, "They did it again, didn't they?" I told him everything. The announcement, Mom volunteering me, Amanda's training comment, and the way my father smiled at Ethan like producing children made him heroic, while my adult life was treated like a waiting room for other people's emergencies. Caleb listened, then said, "Chloe, this isn't help anymore. This is ownership." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Then my phone lit up again. It was my mother. When I didn't answer, she texted, "Come to the house now. We need to fix your attitude before this becomes a bigger problem." Caleb told me not to go. He said people like that didn't want a conversation. They wanted surrender. But part of me still believed that if I spoke clearly enough, calmly enough, with enough proof that I was a person and not a backup plan, they would finally hear me. So I drove to my parents' house. The moment I walked in, my mother was waiting in the kitchen stirring iced tea like she was hosting lunch instead of an intervention. Ethan sat at the table scrolling on his phone. Amanda leaned against the counter with red eyes that looked too perfect, like she had practiced crying without ruining her makeup. Dad stood near the sliding door, silent as always. "Chloe," Mom said, "we're not asking for much." "You didn't ask at all," I replied. Ethan looked up. "Don't be dramatic. Nobody said you'd raise them forever." Amanda folded her arms. "Just until we get through the pregnancy, and maybe the first year after. You know how hard babies are." "That is not a small favor," I said. "That is a life." Mom sighed like I was a difficult child. "You work from home 3 days a week. You rent. You don't have a husband. You don't have children. What are you protecting so fiercely?" That sentence hit harder than yelling. It was the cleanest version of what they believed. Because my life didn't look like theirs, it counted less. I said, I am protecting myself. Ethan snorted. From your own family? From being consumed by people who call it family when it benefits them. The room froze. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost declined it, but something told me to answer. Hello? A man's voice said, Miss Chloe Jenkins? This is Officer Brooks from the Oak Ridge Community Center. Are you aware that 3 children were dropped off here this morning under your name? I looked at Ethan. His face changed before anyone spoke. Just a tightening around the mouth, but it was enough. What children? I asked, already knowing. Officer Brooks continued. There is a handwritten note stating that you agreed to supervise Zoe, Lucas, and Maya today, and that their parents would be unavailable. Staff became concerned because no adult checked them in properly. My mother reached for the counter. Amanda looked away. Ethan said, It's not a big deal. And that was when I understood. They hadn't just assumed I would obey. They had created a situation where refusal would make me look cruel. I left my parents' house without another word, because if I had stayed, I might have said something that would have made the story about my anger instead of their choices. Officer Brooks asked if I could come to the community center to clarify the situation, and I told him yes. But I also said something I had never said to an authority figure before. I want it documented that I did not consent to take responsibility for those children. There was a pause. Then he said, Understood, Miss Jenkins. Please drive safely. Ethan followed me to the porch, lowering his voice like he was doing me a favor. Don't make this official. I turned back. You made it official when you involved strangers. He rolled his eyes. They're your niece and nephews. Then why did you leave them with a note? He didn't answer. That silence followed me to the community center. My mind dragged me backward through years of small thefts. Saturdays taken because Ethan needed one break. Vacation days used because Amanda said daycare germs made her anxious. My mother telling relatives, Chloe is wonderful with the kids, while forgetting to mention I had cried in my car afterward because I was exhausted and unseen. At the center, the front desk worker recognized my name before I introduced myself. They're in the activity room, she said gently. Officer Brooks is with them. I walked through a hallway painted with bright handprints and paper stars, and the sweetness of the place made the situation feel uglier. Zoe sat at a small table with her arms wrapped around herself. Lucas stared at a puzzle without touching it. Maya clutched a stuffed rabbit that wasn't hers. Owen wasn't there, which I later learned was only because Amanda had decided he was too little for the plan. The moment Zoe saw me, her face crumpled with relief. Aunt Chloe, she whispered. I knelt beside her, but I didn't promise everything would be okay. Children deserve truth softened, not lies wrapped in comfort. I said, I'm here, and the grown-ups are going to figure this out. Lucas looked at the officer and asked, Are we in trouble? That question nearly broke me. No, I said immediately. You are not in trouble. Officer Brooks handed me a plastic sleeve containing the note. Is this familiar handwriting? I knew before I finished reading. It was my mother's. The note said, Chloe Jenkins has agreed to watch Zoe, Lucas, and Maya until further notice. She is their aunt and has no other obligations. Their parents are preparing for a new baby and need family support. Please call Chloe if there are any issues. I read the sentence, has no other obligations 3 times. It felt less like a note and more like a confession. My mother had written my worth down on paper and handed it to strangers. Officer Brooks asked, Did you agree to this arrangement verbally or in writing? No. Have you previously been a caregiver for them? I took a breath. I have babysat them before, sometimes under pressure, but I have never agreed to ongoing care, emergency pickup authority, or custody for any period of time. He nodded and wrote that down. Do you have messages showing refusal? Yes. I showed him the texts from the night before. My absolutely not. My mother's, don't embarrass this family. Ethan's, you'll do it anyway. And Amanda's, you owe us because we gave you purpose. Officer Brooks' expression changed at that one. He explained that the center could not transfer care to me just because a relative left a note. Staff had called the police because the children had been dropped near the side entrance before full registration, and the adult who left them had not completed the required forms. That detail mattered. My family hadn't even had the courage to walk inside and say their lie out loud. "What happens now?" I asked. "Their parents will be contacted. If they cannot retrieve them promptly, child services may be notified. You are not required to accept responsibility. In fact, if you do not consent, you should not take them home just to calm the situation." I looked at Zoe, Lucas, and Maya. My family had counted on my love for them being stronger than my survival instinct. Zoe reached for my sleeve. "Mom said you wanted us." I closed my eyes for 1 second. "I always want you safe," I told her, "but grown-ups are not allowed to lie about who is responsible for you." Officer Brooks asked if I wanted to wait while he called Ethan and Amanda. I said yes. Then I took photos of the note, screenshots of the messages, and a picture of the center's visitor log showing the time the children were found. I wanted revenge, but not the messy, screaming kind. I wanted something cleaner. I wanted the truth to become impossible to deny. Ethan arrived first, angry because anger was easier than shame. Amanda followed behind him, one hand on her stomach even though she was barely showing, using the pregnancy like a shield before anyone had attacked her. My mother came last, dressed in formal clothes for no reason, except that she liked looking respectable while doing ugly things. My father stayed in the parking lot, close enough to claim involvement, far enough to avoid responsibility. Officer Brooks asked them to step into a side room. I was invited because my name was on the note. Ethan immediately said, "This is a family misunderstanding." Officer Brooks looked at the note. A misunderstanding usually does not involve leaving children at a facility without proper check-in. Amanda's face tightened. "They weren't abandoned. Chloe was supposed to come." I said, "I never agreed to come." Mom turned to me with that disappointed look she had weaponized my whole life. "Chloe, this is not the time for stubbornness." 3 children had been left with strangers. Police were involved, and somehow my boundary was still the emergency. Officer Brooks asked who wrote the note. Nobody answered. Then he looked directly at my mother. "Mrs. Jenkins?" She lifted her chin. "I wrote it because Chloe has always helped. She knows these children. They feel safe with her." "That was not the question," he said. "Did she agree to be responsible for them today?" My mother's mouth opened, then closed. Ethan jumped in. "She was being difficult, but we knew she'd come around." "So, she refused?" the officer asked. "She was emotional," Amanda said. "That's not a yes," I replied. Ethan glared at me. "You're really going to do this in front of an officer?" "No," I said. "You did this when you left your children at a community center with my name on a note." The room went still. For the first time, the sentence sounded as bad as it was. My mother reached for the softer weapon. "Chloe, sweetheart, nobody meant harm. You're just so good with them. Ethan and Amanda are under pressure. A 5th baby is a blessing, but it's a lot." Then they should have planned for a lot before announcing it like a trophy. Amanda gasped. Ethan stepped closer. Officer Brooks quietly said, "Sir, please remain seated." Ethan sat, but his face was red. "You've always been jealous," he said. "You can't stand that I have a family and you don't." There it was again. The emptiness they assigned to me so they could fill it with labor. I looked at him and kept my voice calm. "No, Ethan. I can't stand that you keep making children and then treating everyone else as staff." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "How can you say that? I'm pregnant." "Pregnancy does not make lying acceptable." Mom slammed her palm lightly on the table. "Enough. You will apologize to your brother and his wife." I turned to Officer Brooks. "I want it documented that I am not an emergency contact, caregiver, guardian, or child care provider unless I personally agree in writing." He nodded. Ethan laughed bitterly. "You're making yourself look heartless." I took out my phone. "No, I'm making myself clear." Then I read the messages aloud. "You'll do it anyway. You owe us because we gave you purpose. Don't embarrass this family. Come fix your attitude." Amanda tried to interrupt, but Officer Brooks asked her to wait. My mother's face changed as each sentence landed in the room. She had expected me to be flustered, apologetic, cornered by guilt. She had not expected evidence. That was my first real taste of power, not revenge as destruction, but revenge as documentation. Officer Brooks explained that the children needed to be retrieved by their parents and that the incident would be recorded. He also said a referral could be made if there were repeated attempts to leave the children without confirmed care. Ethan's confidence cracked. A referral? Are you serious? When children are left without proper supervision, yes, Officer Brooks said. Amanda started crying for real then, not because of what she had done to the kids, but because consequences had entered the room. My mother whispered, "Chloe, look what you're causing." That sentence would have destroyed me a year earlier, but sitting there with her handwriting in a plastic sleeve and her lies on record, I finally saw the trick. They caused harm, then handed me the shame. I said, "I didn't cause this. I refuse to hide it." Ethan leaned forward. "If you walk out on us, I'll tell everyone you abandoned the kids. I'll make sure the whole family knows what kind of aunt you are." I smiled, and I think that scared him more than shouting would have. "Then I'll show them the note." My mother stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. The old Chloe would have folded. The old Chloe would have taken the children home, ordered pizza, cried in the bathroom, and apologized by Sunday. The woman sitting in that room was done paying for love with obedience. When the meeting ended, Ethan and Amanda had to sign the children out themselves. I hugged Zoe, Lucas, and Maya goodbye, making sure they knew I was not angry with them. Zoe whispered, "Are you still our aunt?" I kissed her hair and said, "Always, but adults have to tell the truth." Outside, my father finally approached me in the parking lot. For 1 second, I thought he might say he was sorry. Instead, he said, "You took this too far." I looked at him and said, "No, Dad, I finally stopped carrying it quietly." Then I drove away while my phone began to explode. By the time I got home, there were 23 missed calls, 48 text messages, and 1 voicemail from my mother that began with, "I hope you're proud of yourself," which told me everything. I did not answer. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and wrote the most important letter of my life. It was not emotional. That mattered. Emotion was what they twisted. Facts were harder to bend. I wrote, "I, Chloe Jenkins, do not consent to be listed, named, implied, or represented as a caregiver, guardian, emergency contact, transportation provider, or child care provider for Ethan and Amanda Jenkins's children without my prior written agreement for a specific date and time." I added that any future attempt to leave children in my care without consent would be reported to the appropriate authorities. I attached screenshots, the photo of the note, and my refusal texts. I sent it by email to Ethan, Amanda, my mother, my father, and blind copied myself. Then I saved everything in a folder labeled Family Boundary Documentation. It felt cold. It also felt like oxygen. Then I called Caleb. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't take the kids home." I didn't. He exhaled. "Good. I'm proud of you." That sentence landed without a hook in it. We met for dinner that night, and Caleb helped me make a plan. First, no phone calls, only written communication. Second, no visits to my parents' house without a witness or clear reason. Third, contact the community center in writing to confirm that I had never consented to be responsible for the children. Fourth, if Ethan tried to smear me, respond once with facts, not arguments. "You don't beat a manipulation machine by feeding it more emotion," Caleb said. "You unplug it." I wanted to believe the worst was over. It wasn't. 2 days later, my cousin Sarah sent me a screenshot from a family group chat I had muted months earlier. Ethan had written, "Chloe abandoned my kids at a community center because she was bitter about our new baby." Amanda added, "Some women can't handle seeing others build families." My mother replied with a prayer emoji, and "We are heartbroken by her choices." Then came the relatives. Aunt Brenda wrote, "Shameful." Uncle Arthur added, "Your grandparents would be disappointed." Someone I barely knew wrote, "This is why people without children don't understand sacrifice." I stared at the screen feeling the old heat rise. Not guilt this time. Precision. I asked Sarah, "Are they saying I agreed to watch the kids?" She replied, "Yes. Ethan says you backed out last minute." So I did exactly what Caleb told me. I wrote one message and sent it to the group chat. For clarity, I never agreed to watch the children. They were left at the community center with a note falsely stating I had accepted responsibility. Officer Brooks documented that I did not consent. I will not discuss the children publicly, but I will correct false claims about my involvement. Then I attached one image. The note, with the children's names partially covered for privacy but my mother's sentence visible. Chloe has no other obligations. Silence. For 11 beautiful minutes, nobody typed. Then Sarah sent a private message. Oh my God. Aunt Brenda deleted her comment. Uncle Arthur left the chat. My mother called immediately. I let it ring. Ethan texted, "Take that down." I replied, "Stop lying." He wrote, "You're humiliating, Mom." I replied, that was the second taste of power. The first had been documentation. The second was refusing to protect people from the truth of their own handwriting. But the group chat was only the beginning. Amanda's sister, who worked with someone from the community center, apparently heard that an incident report existed. Suddenly, the story was not, "Chloe is heartless." It was, "Why were Ethan and Amanda's kids left without proper check-in?" Their church friends started asking careful questions. A neighbor mentioned seeing my mother's car near the side entrance that morning. Ethan went from threatening me to begging me to stop escalating. I told him the same thing each time. I am not escalating. I am keeping records. Then Officer Brooks called again. His voice was serious. "Ms. Jenkins, the center has received conflicting statements from your family. They are now claiming you were part of an informal rotation and failed to appear." I almost laughed at the desperation. That is false. Do you have written communication showing your refusal before the children were dropped off? Yes, I said. Several. Please send them to the case email. We also recommend you provide a written statement. My fingers went cold, but not from fear, from clarity. My family had tried to turn my refusal into neglect. Now the same evidence they ignored was becoming the thing that protected me. That night, I wrote my statement. I included dates, prior incidents, times I had been pressured, times I had refused, and times I had helped, but made clear it was temporary. I did not exaggerate. I didn't need to. The truth was already heavy enough. When I finished, I read the final sentence twice. I love my niece and nephews, but love for children must not be used to manufacture consent from an adult. The official meeting happened the following week at the community center, and this time I did not go alone. Caleb came with me, not to speak for me, but to sit beside me as proof that I had someone in my corner who did not benefit from my silence. Officer Brooks was there, along with the center director, Miss Alvarez, and a child services intake worker named Renee. Ethan and Amanda arrived late. My mother came with them, carrying a folder like she was a lawyer, though later I learned it contained nothing but printed photos of me with the kids at birthdays and holidays, as if smiling beside children proved I had agreed to raise them. My father came too, but he sat in the back, looking smaller than I remembered. Ms. Alvarez began by explaining that the purpose of the meeting was to establish safety procedures and clarify responsibility. Ethan jumped on that immediately. Exactly. Chloe is making this sound criminal, but it was a misunderstanding. Renee asked, "Who physically dropped the children at the center?" Nobody answered. Miss Alvarez checked her notes. A staff member observed Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins leaving the side entrance area at approximately 8:12 a.m. My mother stiffened. I walked them in. "You did not complete intake," Miss Alvarez said, "and you left before staff confirmed an approved adult." Amanda whispered, "Eleanor, you said it was handled." My mother shot her a look, and for the first time I saw cracks between them. Manipulators work best when everyone shares the same lie. Under questioning, their stories began to separate. Ethan said Amanda was overwhelmed, and Mom offered to help. Amanda said Ethan told her I had agreed after cooling off. Mom said she understood I would do the right thing because I always had. Dad admitted he knew I had said no at the barbecue, but thought I would come around once the children were involved. Renee wrote that down. Their own words were building the case better than mine could. Then my mother opened her folder and slid the photos across the table. "Look at these. Chloe loves them. She has always been involved." Renee looked at the pictures politely. Loving a child does not create legal responsibility without consent. I wanted to frame that sentence. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Amanda started crying again, but this time her tears sounded less theatrical and more frightened. "So what happens now?" she asked. Renee explained that they would be required to provide an updated child care plan, approved emergency contacts, and written confirmation from each person listed. The center suspended their drop-off privileges until the plan was complete. Child services would not remove the children based on this incident alone. but the report would remain documented. If there were another attempt to leave the children without confirmed care, it could become a neglect investigation. Ethan stared at me like I had created the consequences myself. "Are you happy?" he asked. I answered honestly, "I am relieved." Miss Alvarez turned to me. "Miss Jenkins, would you like your name removed from all center records except as a relative with no pickup authority?" "Yes," I said, "immediately." Amanda looked panicked. "But what if there's an emergency?" I looked at her clearly. "Then you call someone who agreed to be your emergency contact." She said, "We don't have anyone else." And there it was, the truth. They had no plan because their plan had always been me. Renee suggested local childcare resources, parenting support programs, and a budgeting consultation for paid care before the baby arrived. Ethan looked offended at the phrase paid care, as if strangers deserved wages, but I deserved obligation. My mother tried one last time. "Chloe, please, don't tear this family apart over paperwork." I turned to her. "Paperwork is the only reason you can't lie about me anymore." The meeting ended with signatures. Nobody expected forms, acknowledgments, and written restrictions. The revenge wasn't loud. It was blue ink on white paper. Ethan and Amanda had to sign that they understood I was not a caregiver. My mother had to sign a statement acknowledging she had no authority to assign childcare responsibilities to me. My father had to sign as a witness because he had heard my refusal. Watching his hand shake over the pen did not make me happy. It made me sad for the version of me who had waited years for him to protect me, only to realize he had always protected the easier piece. After the meeting, Amanda caught me near the exit. "Did you really have to show the group chat?" she asked. I said, "Did you really have to say I abandoned your kids?" She looked down. I was scared. So were they. Her face crumpled because someone finally said the children had been scared too. She whispered, "Ethan said you'd cave." "I know. And Eleanor said you needed purpose." I swallowed the anger in my throat. "I already had purpose. You all just didn't respect it." She didn't apologize then, but she stopped defending it. And that was the first honest thing she had done. When I walked outside, my mother was waiting by my car. "You've changed," she said. I opened the door. "No, Mom. I stopped translating disrespect into duty." Then I drove home with every window down, even though it was cold, because for the first time in years, I wanted to feel the air move around me without asking permission. The fallout did not arrive all at once. It came in waves, and each wave took something from the version of my family that had survived on appearances. First, the community center required Ethan and Amanda to complete a formal childcare plan before the kids could attend any programs again. That meant listing approved adults, getting signatures, paying late fees, and attending a parent responsibility meeting. Ethan complained that bureaucracy was destroying families. Nobody said it to his face, but people noticed that bureaucracy was just another word for rules he could not charm his way around. Then Amanda's mother found out the full story. She called Amanda, not me, and asked why her grandchildren had been left at a center under a false arrangement while Amanda was home, resting. That argument became loud enough that Ethan texted me, "Hope you're enjoying the drama you caused." I did not respond. Silence had become my language. Second, my mother's reputation took a hit she never saw coming. For years, she had been the generous grandmother, the wise mother, the woman relatives called when they needed advice about family unity. But the screenshot of her note changed the way people heard her. "Chloe has no other obligations." Those 5 words traveled farther than any speech I could have made. Aunt Brenda apologized in a voice message. Sarah told me several cousins had started comparing stories, realizing my mother had done versions of this to other people too. Assigning work, rewriting consent, using guilt as a calendar. At the next church gathering, someone asked Mom if she had sorted out the childcare misunderstanding. And according to Sarah, my mother left early with a headache. Third, Ethan and Amanda had to live inside the life they kept trying to outsource. With the center watching their paperwork and relatives suddenly cautious about being volunteered, they had to pay for actual help. The cost shocked them. Ethan canceled a golf weekend. Amanda sold the designer stroller she had bought for baby number 5 because, as she posted online, priorities change when family support disappears. I almost replied, "Family support did not disappear. Free labor resigned." I didn't. Growth sometimes means letting the obvious insult remain unsent. 6 months later, after the baby was born, Ethan sent me one photo. No caption. A little boy, healthy, beautiful, completely innocent. I looked at it for a long time, feeling love and grief exist in the same breath. Then I wrote, "He's beautiful. Congratulations." Ethan replied, "Do you want to meet him?" I knew what that question used to mean. It meant, "Are you ready to be useful again?" So I answered carefully, "I would love to meet him as his aunt. I am not available for childcare." He didn't reply for 2 days. Then he wrote, "Fine." That one word was not an apology, but it was a border. I visited on a Sunday afternoon with Caleb waiting nearby at a bookstore because I still didn't fully trust the room. The house was chaos. Laundry on the couch, bottles by the sink, Zoe helping Maya with a shoe, Lucas watching cartoons too loudly. Amanda looked exhausted. Ethan looked older. My mother was there too, holding the baby, but she did not hand him to me with instructions. She asked stiffly, "Would you like to hold him?" Asked. That word mattered. I said yes. The baby was warm and impossibly small against my chest. For a moment, everyone was quiet. Then Zoe climbed beside me and whispered, "Mom says grown-ups have to ask now." My eyes burned, but I smiled. That's a good rule. Later in the kitchen, Amanda surprised me. "I'm sorry for what I said at the barbecue," she said about training. I studied her face, searching for the angle, the trap, the hidden invoice. I didn't find one. "Thank you," I said. "That hurt." She nodded. "I know." Ethan did not apologize. My father did not apologize. My mother came close once when she said, "I suppose I assumed too much." It was the smallest possible admission, but it proved the past could no longer continue the same way. That was the part people don't always understand about revenge. The most satisfying revenge is not always watching someone collapse. It is watching them finally accept the reality of your boundaries.